Where do I start? I'm going to say first, Baruch Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu lezaman hazeh. There are a lot of people in this room that I've seen before, and it's been a very long time since we last saw you. Some people that are new to me in terms of faces, but whose names I've definitely heard of before, and some that tonight is the first. If you don't know what you got yourself into, then welcome. We might see a few less chairs next time around. I almost didn't make it here tonight. Almost like you, I almost didn't make it tonight. We were landing in JFK, and they said that the weather was so bad, they put us in a holding pattern. And the pilot gets on and says, I'm sorry, but we're running low on fuel. We can't stay in the holding pattern forever. We'll probably have to divert to another airport or another city. And I'm thinking to myself, I have 4 hours to make it from JFK, to rent the car, to see my brother, to come to this class. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu better help. He said, please pray that we can land in JFK. And I prayed, and Baruch Hashem, not my prayers. Maybe it was my wife's, but not my prayers. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered us, and we are here right now. For me, this is not a first time. With most of you, I've learned Torah many hours. Some of you have seen me more than I've seen you, of course. But the zechut for me is to be able to walk into a room of people who are not strangers. I'm able to learn with friends. And learning with friends is a completely different experience than learning with strangers. And when I learn with friends, I'm able to say things and share things that I otherwise wouldn't be able to share if I was sitting in a room of strangers. And so tonight, I promise no holds barred. I'm not going to hold back. I want to share something that's been sitting on my mind. When we've been discussing these last, it's been a long time since people like Zev and Benjamin have been pushing me to think about New York. There's a few Jews in New York, you know, we should probably consider New York as a Jewish option. A few. You should see what we have in San Diego. Itai is here for my community in San Diego. We just lost like 30% of our community right now. And an idea that's been sitting with me, but first a few thank yous. I want to thank this Kehillat for hosting us here. Lo muvan me'elav. It's not self-understood that a community would open up its doors in its social hall and not ask even anything back. Even when I wrote a thank you, they were a little like, well, that's too much to say thank you. I'm very grateful for the hosting us here in this place. For my brother Onen and my sister Akira who made this happen. If you don't know Onen, that's my brother. And that right behind him is my other brother Ariel and his wife Shira, who also have been part of this vision of how do we get Shiviti to New York. And when I was thinking about how, it's less important how we bring Shiviti to New York and more of why. What's the reason that we need yet another Bet HaMidrash, another group of people that are learning together? And so I want to tell you a story. Before I tell you a story, I read a quote. This quote actually is attributed to all kinds of famous football players and all kinds. It comes from a science fiction post-apocalyptic novel. And I don't remember the quote entirely. But something along the lines of, my grandfather used to walk 10 miles in the snow to work. And my father, he took a bus to work. I drive a Ford to work. So my kid will drive a Mercedes to work. And my grandson will drive a Ferrari to work. But my great-grandson, he'll probably end up walking to work again. The world is a cycle. It's a cycle, like the air conditioning. It goes on, it goes off. I was sitting with a very dear friend of mine the other Friday night at my house, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we're discussing what it's like to be a rabbi in these post-apocalyptic times. And he told me, you know what it's like? We work so hard to create families and communities and friends that understand Torah in a frame of reference that is beautiful, that embodies the words of King David. The Torah is a pleasant Torah. Her pathways are full of peace. And then we send our kids to Jewish schools. We pay a lot of money to send our kids to Jewish schools. And then we send them off to yeshiva or seminary in Israel. And our kids come back, and some of them won't eat in our houses, and some of them don't want our rabbis to marry them. Some of them tell us how we're heretics because of the things that we raised them to believe, all because of the institutions that we sent our children to. trying to give them a better Jewish education than perhaps we got. And so it's a cycle. No matter how much you can mikimi ma'afar dan, no matter how much you can pick yourself up out of those ashes, when you plug your children back into the Jewish community, what you're almost guaranteed is that all of the mistakes of yesterday will be repeated on them, and that they will have to go through the same painstaking soul journey that you went through, and you never know if they're going to end up in the same page as you, sitting at the same table as you, praying with you or eating with you. And so yet another cycle of heartbreak begins. And it's like every time we're reinventing the wheel, and we're reinventing over and over and over, and all the work that we do, we can't seem to get everyone out of the cycle. And so I don't fault all the other wonderful organizations in the world that do what they do, like make sure that your kids won't eat in your house. I fault ourselves, and our communities, and our friends, that as much as we study and we learn and we grow, we clearly haven't figured out the formula of, so where do I get to raise my kids so they don't end up like that? And I don't purport to have answers. But I want to talk about a problem, and maybe at the end of this problem, we can think together about what might be a solution. And to me, that would answer the why a Shiviti Bet Midrash of New York. I titled today's shiur, Ignoramus Infestation. And the reason that wasn't on the flyer I don't know how the board of directors would respond to that flyer. Combating fanaticism through education. If you had to push me up against the wall and say, what is the mission statement? What is the dream behind the educational model at Shiviti? I would read to you the following Mishnah in Masechet Sotah. If you don't have a source sheet, I have about 10 or 12 of them here. This is only a half source sheet. All the extra reading is on the PDF version. If you want a PDF version, I ask you to go to shiviti.org/New York, and you will find a PDF there that you can use on your phone or your iPad or whatever you have, whatever you prefer. Shiviti.org/New York. Rabbi Yoshua says, Chasid shoteh, a righteous fool, v'rasha arum, and a conniving rasha, evil person, v'isha perusha, and a woman who is a perusha, an abstinent woman, umakot perushin, and those who hurt themselves because of their piety. Hare elu, this Mishnah says mechale olam. In my books, the version is mevale olam. These are those who destroy the world. Rabbi Yoshua identifies that righteous fools are one of the 4 categories of people who destroy the world. What does it mean destroy the world? It doesn't mean that they create negative energies. It doesn't mean that they make you feel offended. It means they literally are responsible for the destruction of the world, especially the Jewish world as we know it. The Rambam explains it. I'm almost positive that I copied this from the Rav Kapach Rambam's translation, but I can't promise you that for sure. The Rambam says, Chasid shoteh. What is a righteous fool? Maybe we can get that one off. That one's on. A Chasid shoteh, inyano, the idea behind it, Hagzama bazihirut uvedikduk. It is an exaggerated observance, particularity in mitzvot, ad shenimas be'enei bnei adam, until this person becomes repulsive to other human beings surrounding them. A person whose religious observance causes them to be abhorrent, to be repulsive to other people. Ve'oseh ma'asim sheno chayav. A chasid shoteh, somebody who destroys the world, is somebody who does things religiously that they're not obligated to do. V'ke'elu amar Rabbi Yoshua shoteh b'chasiduto. That's what Rabbi Yoshua meant, that he's foolish in his piety. ואמרו בפרקם הירושלמי שבת כל מי שהוא פטור מדבר ועושהו נקרא הדיוט. Our rabbis already told us in Masechet Shabbat that anyone who is exempt from something, yet still chooses to do it, is called a hediot, an ignoramus. This ignoramus is today what we probably identify as the whole Jewish community. And they have taken over any place that you will go. So what do I mean any place? It's not just your synagogues and your schools and the yeshivot. It's your restaurants, it's your wedding halls, it's your... wherever you go. The Jewish community has become infested with ignorant people who think that they're so pious, yet their piety causes everyone around them to want to have nothing to do with religion. And that, says the Rambam, is one of the main reasons why our world is being destroyed. Now, true, if I was talking to the whole world, there are probably other things in the world agenda that are causing problems in the world. If I was talking to other people, say, why are you getting upset at the Orthodox community? I'm not speaking to Reform or Conservative or Retail. If I was there, I would speak about other problems. Yeah, I'm speaking to community people who identify mostly as a world that people care about Torah mitzvot, yet I see that the way that people care about Torah mitzvot accomplishes exactly the opposite of what they're trying to do. They cause people to run for the hills. And this is not just a little part of the philosophy, this is what it's all about. Because if our Judaism is causing people to run, then we have to stop and ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong? The Rambam is already telling you that the first step of what we do wrong is we allow people to attempt piety while remaining ignorant. And what does David HaMelech say? Lo am ha'aretz chasid. It's impossible for an ignoramus to be pious. And bur yirechet, a bur, cannot be a fearer of sin. We're a people of the book. We are an alphabetic people. And when we create a religion, I'm borrowing terms that you should understand, of analphabetic Jews, then you could only imagine that the magic that follows will come and extinguish the flame of our Torah. And so I want to give you an example. An example of something that you're probably so used to that you don't even think twice. You don't do it. I know that nobody in this room does it. I'm sure of it. And if you do, Rosh Hashanah is right now. Tonight you're going to say, Selichotcha tanu lefanecha. You're going to be done. You won't do it anymore. But there are for sure people around you who do this. And I want to introduce to you a letter. This letter comes from Rabbi Yosef Masas. It's based on the source texts of 3, 4, and 5 regarding an etrog. You're now going to come to Sukkot. In San Diego, how do you buy a lulav and etrog? You sign up your name on the mailing list, $35, $45, $55. By the way, I realize that in San Diego we have cheap daled minim. Over here, people are paying. It's like you live in the greatest Jewish community in the United States, and you're paying 17 times what we pay for. I don't understand how that works. But you get, like, it's kosher, kosher aleph, 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 and then you realize if you're in Israel, they're not kosher for anybody. Nobody buys the stuff. That's why they send it to San Diego. But you get a prepackaged etrog, haravot, adasim. There's nothing you have to do when you go to other communities. There are tables and there are booths, and you can pick out this one and that one, and your etrog, and the Moroccan etrog, and the Italian etrog. Do you know there are Jews who believe? Every time I say this, I laugh. There are Jews who believe that Moshe Rabbeinu,
the Italian etrog.
He left the desert in Egypt to go to Italy to get an etrog. I'll tell you a true story. I'm not making it up. You didn't make it up. And then he came back to the desert with his etrog and used it, and that's why they prefer etrogim that come from Italy. And they're willing to pay triple the amount of an Israeli etrog, which Harav Kook says, for example, that an Israeli etrog that is grafted is preferable to an etrog from Italy for sure, that's pure and kasher. Your mitzvah is connected to the land of Israel. You're going to Italy. Moshe Rabbeinu left the desert. He couldn't get to Israel. He had to get to Italy. You have to ask yourself that people believe fantastical things. Well, right. There were kosher cruises, Mediterranean Sea cruises then. So the Gemara tells us that if you buy an etrog and it has a hole in it, the hole doesn't make an etrog not kasher. But it only becomes not kasher if it's missing a piece of the etrog, or if the hole maybe goes the whole way through. You can look at these details over here. But this led to many people wondering whether the etrogim that we sell in the store, and you see them, they have no holes. What happens if you examine them with a magnifying glass? Now, if I find a hole in a magnifying glass, is that a hole? Or is it not a hole because I can't see it with my eyes? And so this question was asked to Rabbi Yosef Masas. I don't have the exact year he was asked this question, but that's on page 2. Let's say that this question was asked long enough ago that Rabbi Yosef Masas was familiar with the phenomenon but surprised by the question. Rabbi Yosef Masas was a Moroccan rabbi born in Morocco, but later became a rabbi in Tlemcen, Algeria. If you've listened to any of my classes, likely you've heard a lot about Rabbi Yosef Masas. Rabbi Yosef Masas was one of those few courageous chachamim who thought for himself, didn't allow other people to think for him, and got in major trouble because of that. In one of my classes that I taught in the Shiviti New York, United Kingdom, I gave a whole shiur on all the rabbis, Sephardic rabbis, who opposed Rabbi Yosef Masas and considered him an unreliable rabbi because of these bold stances that he had in halakha. Nothing is new. Rabbinic violence is a thing that we've been living with for a very long time. Bullying other chachamim into sharing your opinion. Nobody wants to hear your opinion. They just want to hear their opinion out of your mouth. And Rabbi Yosef Masas is asked a question by a rabbi, Baruch Lasri. I don't know who he is, but was a chacham in Morocco. Page 2, source 6. Sha'alti yididi b'michtavcha hana'im. You asked me, my friend, in your very pleasant letter. Why did he write very pleasant letter? He once got a letter from a yeshiva student. And he told this yeshiva student, listen, I don't know where you're going to school, but they didn't teach you how to write nicely. Please go back, take a class on how to write Hebrew properly. The amount of time it took me to decode your handwriting was such a waste of my life that I asked you, please don't write me letters unless you learn how to write Hebrew again. So when he says, b'michtavcha hana'im, this is a North African rabbi chaver. There's no politically correct conversation here. Once there was a rabbi, he sent Rabbi Yosef Masas a book of his songs and poems that he wrote, all kinds of piyutim. And he wrote to Rabbi Yosef Masas. Rabbi Yosef Masas says, my dear rabbi, I read the whole book from cover to cover. And all I can tell you is there's not one song in this book. This is a miserable failure of writing. I would recommend that you bury this book and don't show it to anybody so you don't embarrass yourself in public. So when he says, "B'michtavcha hana'im" in your pleasant letter, that means he truly enjoyed his letter. אודות אתרוג שנבדק בעיניים מאירות ולא נמצאו בו שום דופי. You found an etrog. You looked with your eyes, there's nothing wrong with this etrog. It's a beautiful etrog. ואך על ידי זכוכית מגדלת הרעות. But now with a magnifying glass, נראו בו הרבה נקבים עם חסרונות. They find all kinds of dots and holes that are actually missing pieces of the etrog. בתר מה נזן? אם בתר הזכוכית הוא פסטין עליה, או בתר מראה עיניים ומכשירין עליה. Do we look for the holes in the etrog, the blemishes with our eyes, and then the etrog is kasher? Or do we look at this etrog with the magnifying glass, and now this etrog is not kasher? Meaning, is it kasher or is it not kasher? You might think, why in the world did he come all the way to New York to teach us about looking at etrogim with magnifying glasses? It's not the question that is bothering me. It's the response of Rabbi Yosef Masas that keeps me up at night. And I feel like in a time of Elul, where everyone is doing teshuvah and they're realigning themselves, and now they're going to come Sukkot, and they're all going to do this. So Rabbi Yosef Masas answers, teshuvah. Here's the answer. Even though you didn't really explain everything of what happened in the story, I've already heard similar stories of people that check etrogim with magnifying glass. Have you ever seen someone check an etrog with a magnifying glass? I don't think there's been a year in my life that someone hasn't brought me an etrog to examine for them if it's kasher. My first question, what did you see wrong with it? Nothing. That's why we're bringing it to you. What do you... So, ואתה ידידי, you my dear friend, הסר כעס מלבך. Don't be so angry. כי זו מכה מהלכת בכמה מדינות. This plague has already struck many, many countries. שבכל מוצאי כיפור, on every מוצאי כיפור after the fast, יוצאים כמה הדיוטות מחוריהן. There are ignoramuses which creep out of their hiding places. ומתקשטין בטלית של תלמידי חכמים, and they dress themselves up in clothing of Torah scholars. לבדוק גם הם פרי עץ הדר. They also want to see, look, we know how to check אתרוגים. וכדי להראות פחזותם וסכלותם, and because they so desire to advertise their stupidity, לעיני אנשים שכמותם, especially in front of people that are just as stupid as they are, לכן הם מביאים בידם אותם זכוכיות המגדות הרעות. They bring their own magnifying glasses in their hands. What do you mean their own magnifying glasses? I once had a guest, came to me from New York, not from this part of New York. And he came to visit me. There are more stories I could tell you about him later. That was a very unique visit. The impression is still in my mind. He came to visit me. He brought me a gift for Shabbat. Now, there are many people bringing a lot of gifts for Shabbat. I don't ever ask for gifts. It says, Soneh matanot ichya. Rabbi Eliza is trying to kill me with the gift. No, it says that if you hate gifts, then you will live. So at least I'll take them, but I don't want to die. So hopefully, yes, these are the kind of gifts. These are good. This is Baruch Hashem. People come, for example, my house, if you bring me alcohol, I'll send it back home with you. In my house, we don't have alcohol. Wine, maybe. But more than that, you can take it back to wherever you came from. But people bring things. They bring cookies, cakes, platters. And someone once brought me a plate like gefilte fish and bagels. And it was like, of all the people you could bring that platter to. Okay, it's everyone and their things. This person said, I brought you a gift all the way from New York. He was so proud. Took it out of his pocket. This is a pocket-sized magnifying glass. I'm looking like, it's very special. Thank you. And what's it for? Oh, this is it's not a regular one. This is the one that jewelers use when they examine diamonds. Think to myself, I once in my life bought a diamond. I'm still paying the loans back on that diamond. My wife doesn't wear it because she doesn't like it because I have bad taste in diamonds, clearly. And I don't know exactly what you want me to do with this. He says, no, this is a diamond magnifying glass to check all of the vegetables and fruits that you eat in your kitchen. And it's pocket sized, so you can keep it in your pocket. Wherever you go, you get invited to somebody's house. You can whip it out and check with. Now you have to understand, for this person, this was a really special gift. For me, I didn't have a frame of reference in which to appreciate the kindness of this person. I hope they never watch this class. So what happens here? He says, these people, they hide their magnifying glasses like a treasure, mishana l'shana, from year to year, letzorech zeh, just for this purpose of checking etrogim. Somebody once sent me a meme. It showed a lot of people checking etrogim with magnifying glasses. And I said, I would never trust someone to pick out an etrog for me with a magnifying glass if they only date their wife for 3 days. Umetilim al yadam mum b'kodashim. And they use these magnifying glasses to cause the holy etrogim, the good ones, to become pisulim. Be'etrogim yikarim v'nedarim b'kodesh אשר אין בהם כל מום. Beautiful etrogim, precious ones that have nothing wrong with them. ובעקימת שפתיים שהיו צרובות בגחלי רתמים, הם אומרים, אל תביטו על מראיהן וגובו כמותן. And they start to make their lips crooked and all kinds of facial motions to tell you, don't look at this terrible etrog. You know what I found in my magnifying glass? כי מאוסים הם מחמת הנקבים שיש בהם חיסרון הנמצאים בהם על ידי הכלי הזה. And they say, look, there are problems. You can't see them. But if you look in our magnifying glass, you'll see all these problems. והחכמים ותלמידיהם, and the Torah scholars and their students, גם הנבונים שבעם, and even the wise, intelligent lay people, שומעים, they hear all of this. They see these people come to the etrog market and examine etrogim. ושותקים, but they're quiet. ואין חוששים להם, and they don't take them seriously. כי הבל יפצה פיהם, וכתותי מחתת שיעורם הם וזכוכותיהם. They're stupid people. Who takes stupid people seriously? Which stupid people come to the shuk? The rabbis don't even bother to speak about them because these people are so out of their mind that it's not worth anybody's breath to talk about them. והכל קונים כפי הדין הנראה לעיני השכל והבשר שתמניכם מבקים. And everybody else, the normal people, and you still know normal Jews that just go buy etrogim that are kasher and they bring them home, and they don't bring magnifying glasses, nor do they ask the people with the magnifying glasses to check their etrogim for them. וגם אתה ידידי, and also you, my son, my friend, עשה אוזנך כאפרכסת, make your ears like a sieve, listen to what I'm telling you. והרחב לבבך כאור הצבי, make your skin flexible like that of a deer. Deer skin clearly is flexible. In Morocco, they used to write Sifrei Torah on deer skin. You can still find some old, I once saw a German Sefer Torah written on deer skin.
There was just one found, a Taimani one, that was donated to some Colorado
Really?
It's just so sad because I don't know if they're going to use it all the time.
Yeah, this is
Old school.
the scary part of deer skin is that it's very fragile. It's not like cow, but if it's Yemenite though, it's going to be thicker, so likely it will last for a long time. Which calf are you not allowed to use to write a Sefer Torah? Pig. Okay, if it's not kosher, that's very good. Oh, no clap. You hear this Rambamist over here? No clap. Which animal are you allowed to use their to write Torah on? Kosher animals, like sure, giraffes.
You need a lot of giraffes.
Yeah, cows, goats, sheep. What are you not allowed to use? Fish, right? Mom said you can't use fish because you can make leather out of fish. Now it's a new thing now, like
They're recycling.
yeah, exactly. They use fish skins to make all kinds of purses and things like that. You can technically write a mezuzah on a salmon skin. It just the Chachamim say that it smells. It's not a good thing to write. Ushma ushtok. Listen to these people and just be quiet. Don't tell them anything. Val tachush l'divrei haborim. Don't take the borim seriously. The ignoramuses. V'otam hetrogim pashut ubarur shem ksherim af lemehadrim. All the etrogim that they find holes in with their magnifying glasses are kosher even for the mehadrim, even for those who want to be strict. De'eno ledayan ela ma she'enav ro'ot. There's a law. The law says that a judge is not allowed to decide a law on anything that he is not familiar with. Once they told me a great rabbi in Israel said that you're not allowed to use iPhones. iPhones are, maybe Android was paying him percentages. That's why he was against the iPhones. And the truth is that you don't have to take such a person seriously, because this person has no intimate knowledge of a cell phone or an iPhone or any kind of phone. And because of that, you can't rule over something you have no familiarity with. People ask me, Pesach time, how do I kasher my air fryer? I don't know. I don't have an air fryer. I went to Costco to try to figure out how to use that air fryer. I don't understand how the thing works. So I'll tell you how to kasher a crock pot and how to do but I don't know how to certain things. I just can't tell you. You also have the flip side. This law applies, for example, in the laws of conversion. Today, Orthodoxy has invented all these standards for conversion. This conversion is good, this conversion is bad. Today even have Jews that we don't accept conversion. Everyone in their own way to get to Gehenna. So today they have these lists. You're on a list, you're not on a list, you're approved, you're not approved. Hillel and Shammai, you remember the famous story, someone comes to convert by them? And Shammai pushes 3 people away and Hillel converts them. So Chachamim are bothered. How could Hillel convert people that Shammai's Bedin rejected? Today that would be, I once tried to accept someone to my Bedin that another Bedin rejected, and the war that they made about that. We said no, how dare you say yes? The law is very simple. Hakol lefi ra'ot enei hadayan. Shammai looked at somebody and said, I don't think I can convert you. In good conscience, I don't think it's the right decision. He's allowed to make that choice. But Hillel is also allowed to sit there and say, but I think I can. And so I'm allowed to make that choice. That's the way that laws work. Judges are not clerks. Judges don't follow, today they are clerks. But real judges, in terms of dayanim, hashiva shoftenu kevarishona, judges make decisions based on the way they see things. And they can only operate with what's in front of them. You have an etrog in front of you. You don't see holes in it, you don't need a magnifying glass. If you would begin to check things with magnifying glasses, you would leave no life for anybody in the world. Look what the Rabbi Yosef Masa says. There are all kinds of magnifying glasses and microscopes and x-rays. You can even look inside of the etrog. We're going to start x-raying our etrogim. So if you begin this process of checking deeply into things, when are you going to stop? Vimken, so let me suggest that ludicrous things will happen if you allow people to check etrogim with magnifying glasses. What could be the problem? Gama sakin shel shchita nivdok al yadan. Maybe people would begin examining the knives of the shechita to see if it has holes with a magnifying glass. We will never find, not in this world and not in the next world, a knife that doesn't have on some micro level, a flaw in it. Because when you start zooming into things, that little thing that you couldn't feel on your nail when you check your shechita knife, my first day in the yeshiva of Harav Peretz, I come to his office, there were terror attacks happening all over Yerushalayim when I first came. And I come into the office, I'm sitting with him, all of a sudden somebody comes in, like a samurai sword. In my head, I'm in a Sephardic yeshiva, okay? You know what people look like? So he comes with a samurai sword. I'm thinking, this is it. We make a bracha now that we're going to die al Kiddush Hashem. And it might have been your cousin. And, yeah, comes in, no, but with a huge knife. And the Peretz takes the knife and feels it with his nail. It's good. You go do shechita with it. You don't have to go check in the sun. No, I have a light bulb. I'm checking the knife. It's good. You check a knife with your nails. Somebody said they knew a shochet used to check a knife with his tongue. Like if you walk in certain neighborhoods, you'll see there are people who clearly, that's how they check their knives, because they, So here, if you start doing it, you only have to check with your nail. If you can't feel it on your nail and you can't see it with your eyes, it doesn't matter that you can find it in a magnifying glass. Soon they're going to start checking the lungs of the animals for holes with magnifying glasses. And then we will never eat meat again, because they will never find lungs that are not porous. But listen to the next one. Rabbi Yosef says, do you know what crazy thing is going to happen if you let people check etrogim with magnifying glasses? It's like the most outlandish thing you've ever heard of in your life. Soon, people are going to start checking their vegetables with magnifying glasses. Now they're going to use microscopes and they're going to find microbes. Do you remember here in New York when the water became not kosher overnight? Yeah. Remember that? Everybody was drinking water. All these great rabbis drinking water. All of a sudden, the water became not kosher. Now, I wasn't living in New York at the time. It's kind of gross to feel. But at the end of the day, I was in a neighborhood and I spoke about that, and it turns out over there people still triple filter their water. So there will come a time, Sir Bius, it's like a science fiction movie. One day, people will check their vegetables with magnifying glasses. Soon we're going to start checking for family purity with magnifying glasses. We will never fulfill our halachic obligations ever. He said, now we have all kinds of other magnifying devices. He said, we even have telescopes that can see the stars in the sky. Now we have to start checking things with telescopes. He said, at the end of the day, we're never going to be able to operate in the Jewish world. I'm skipping some lines. At the end of the day, you can only use your eyes when you check things in halakha. He mentions in the next source, an Ashkenazi source, who says that you don't even have to put on your glasses, because glasses are a magnifying device. Yeah? Your obligation to check with your eyes is with your eyes. Now listen, if you're blind as a bat, right? and you have some well-infested lettuce, okay? Like it's worms in there. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean it's okay. You understand? But he means to say, right, watch. Broccoli. What do we do? Like that, this is exactly, I don't mean that. He means that you don't have to do anything more than what a regular person does. You want to hear more than that? He says, you don't even have to look at the vegetables before you eat them. Look. It should say, you don't have to examine. Look, watch, let me show you. I look at the plate, there are bugs on my plate? No. Now watch this. There's no bugs, now I could eat it. You don't have to do that second step. You just have to look at your food to make sure it looks clean. Zil, keep moving. There's nothing else you have to do. At least not according to halakha. He ends off that really there were more things he could write. He said, now really, I didn't need to write a letter about this at all. But because I know that the ignoramuses think that you have to do these things, I just wanted to write something to remind them that all of what they're doing is nonsense. Now here you're sitting, let's say about 100 years later. You're sitting in Brooklyn. I could imagine, I don't know, so I'm not saying Lashon Hara about anybody. There's not a kosher restaurant that you've eaten at that doesn't use some type of magnifying device or light box or other method of checking for things. That's already become a standard. He mentions here about checking letters in the Sefer Torah. If there's a split in a letter in the Sefer Torah, it's not kosher anymore. What if you look at a magnifying glass and you see all kinds of splits that you can't see with your naked eye? Now all the Sefer Torah are not kosher. today standard issue Sifrei Torah come checked by computers. But you don't need a computer to check. If your sofer looked at the Sefer Torah, and the sofer didn't find anything wrong with the Torah, but the computer found something, listen, the computer is a nice thing, but it's not a sofer. It doesn't matter that the computer found and magnified 1,000 times a mistake. It doesn't make a mistake in the Sefer Torah. You might think, listen, Rabbi Yosef Masas, we know him. He's controversial. He's that kind of guy. So I added, not in the printed versions, because I couldn't print that many papers, but in the PDF version, I added 10 extra pages. 2 letters from Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Alav Shalom. Why from him? I figured I was going to go as mainstream gung-ho Sephardi as I was going to get, especially by a rabbi who didn't appreciate Rabbi Yosef Masas at all. And I would quote to you 2 letters where he quotes this letter of Rabbi Yosef Masas. One letter, if you're on the PDFs, you can see, one letter is on page 6, checking for insects. Chaim Yosef writes here that you don't have to check for insects with a magnifying glass or any other thing. You just have to use your eyes. And the same thing on page 9, he has a letter, a very long letter, about checking Sifrei Torah, that they don't require anything other than your eyes. Koto, thank you so much. So what happens when we allow fanaticism to get out of hand? So people do crazy things, right? It doesn't really affect me. That attitude is a mistake. It's a mistake. You see, when I got married, I'll be very careful. I don't know who watches these videos. When I got married, at my wedding, I had one request. It's outlandish, but it was one request. I was getting married in Borough Park under the subway tracks. So it wasn't my ideal location. It wasn't where I wanted to get married. But Baruch Hashem, I got married to the best thing that ever happened in my life. Baruch Hashem. Everything that you have, for me, everything is because of my wife. Mamash. Everything. And people ask me, who's the biggest donor of Shiviti? My wife. Who gives me the time and the energy and the strength to do what I do? All her. And it's not, some rabbis say that about their wife doesn't do anything. But, Baruch Hashem. So we got married. I wanted to sit next to her at the wedding. It was an outlandish request. I wanted to sit with my wife. And my wife said, listen, you can sit with me, but nobody else is going to be at the wedding. So what are you talking about? I said, how about this? I invented a new idea. It's not my invention. We have a mechitza. You should see the mechitza at my wedding. You would need a telescope to see the top of it. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Masas. I said, let's put a table at the head of the mechitza. I'll sit on the men's side with my dad and your dad, and you'll sit on the ladies' side with your mom and my mom, and we'll sit here. And she's like, listen, that table is going to look like this. It's going to be you, your mom, and your dad. Maybe me if I come to say hello. But my parents will never sit at a table that's across. Sitting together at a wedding, you think we got married or something. And so we didn't get the opportunity to sit together. Why was the thing I started about a wedding? Because I knew here's what would happen. If I were to take down the mechitza by my wedding, you need a mechitza on a wedding? Tell me, you have a mechitza? All those guys, I know that with the big hats, they go to work in Manhattan or wherever they go. They have mechitzot in their workplace? Their 18-year-old secretary they hang out with all day, she gets them Starbucks drink, they go to lunch together. They don't have mechitzot, right? At the wedding, under the supervision of his wife, has anything ever happened at a wedding that wasn't supposed to happen? So if anywhere, I'm an advocate for mechitzot in the workplace. Don't walk away from here like, But at a wedding, what could possibly happen at a wedding? And who are you sitting next to? You sit next to your wife, but let's pretend we don't know each other today. You sit together your whole life. So I said, I know that if I would take down the mechitza, I know which rabbis would leave. I know which ones would leave. Where's the rabbi that says, I'm not coming to the wedding if you guys are too religious? Where's that chacham? Chachamim are supposed to keep us balanced, right? That's supposed to be their job. But if they're pushing us in one direction, and there's never pushback of, don't be too religious, then are they really balancing us, or they're just driving us to the brink of craziness? And fanaticism hurts us. How does it hurt us? I don't know how much time you guys have in your life. I'll tell you how fanaticism hurts us. I want to walk you through it a little bit of what I put here. I want to read you a few pieces, and I want to tie it together for you. But first, before I tell you why fanaticism hurts us, let's first understand where fanaticism comes from. There was a famous Sephardic Chacham. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan. You may have heard of him before. Rabbi Faur, alav shalom, wrote a book about him. In my opinion, it's one of the most amazing books Chacham Faur wrote, more than some of the other books. I know that among some of his students, they're very adamant that nobody else can read the book except for them. But listen, I'm coming not as a student, I'm coming as a person who learned Torah and appreciated what was written. Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan was a rabbi in Rome, he was a rabbi in England, a rabbi in Israel. He was one of the more influential Chachamim of his generation. If you know anyone from the Chazan family, the Chazan rabbis were all over the world. Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan finds himself in contact for the first time with the European Jewish community a couple hundred years ago. And he's met for the first time with problems, Jewish problems, that he never knew existed. He simply never heard of them before. And he's struggling to figure out why does the scenery look the way it does? And so he identifies a few issues. Now today, this is not an Ashkenazi Sephardic thing. I would argue, as incorrect as you might feel that it is, that in today's Orthodox Jewish community, the worst dysfunctional model of Eastern European Judaism has become standard operating procedure for all Orthodox communities around the world. And so I'm talking about Sephardim and Yemenites and everybody sitting in this category, because Kimat, you don't have anybody who's exempt from this cycle. What I was talking about in the beginning. You send your kids to school. Likely the educational model that school is following has nothing to do with the educational model of our Chachamim, for example, in the Mishnah.
So you need to make a school.
I need to do a lot of things. I already have white hairs. I didn't do anything yet. So let's talk about problematic education. Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan on page 3, source 7. He says that when he sees fanaticism on the rise, Hasibah ha'amiti, the true reason he sees, he azivat ha'inyanim ha'talmudiyim ha'meirim et ha'inayim, is the abandonment of proper Talmudic study. What do I mean Talmudic study? You go down to any of these big yeshivot around this city. You're going to walk inside, a lot of people carrying around very big volumes of Talmud. I'm not telling you they don't study Talmud. He meant proper Talmud study. If you ask 3, 4, 5 questions about what they're studying, the way we would ask questions about what you're studying, they'll have no idea what to tell you. You walk into Beit Midrash of any yeshiva in this whole city, I'm ready to sign on it, and ask them 5 or 6 questions about practical Jewish living. Halakha, something about the weekly parsha, and you'll see that they look at you like you fell off the moon. The study is entirely theoretical, not at all what Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan is talking about. What does it mean? To learn Torah, dinei hamitzvot b'shorshan, to learn halakha from its origins. Al-mutar, when you say something is permissible, why is it permissible? How do we get there? Al-asur, how did we get to this prohibition? Are all prohibitions created equally? Are all halachot created equally? Do we know when to ignore certain halachot? Do you know when to not observe halakha? Were you taught that in Jewish school? Were you taught that there are instances where you just don't observe halakha? I'm not talking about saving somebody's life, I'm not talking about situations like that. Lesser situations. In section 8, Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan is very concerned that the way we teach children is not out of classical Jewish sources, but out of all kinds of abridged books of Jewish law. I will avoid naming any names. All of you went to Jewish school before. You all studied some of the most boring Jewish books you read in your whole life. Do this, don't do that, we do this, we do that, we don't do this, we don't do that. What do you get out of that, says Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan? העסק, source 8, בלימודים הקצרים מבלי שורש ונועם. When people study Judaism superficially, without going to the sources and reassessing classical sources, מביא לידי fanatismo, that's not a Hebrew word, brings people to fanaticism. He's in Italy. אשר אין אחריו כמוהו, there's nothing else worse than it. יען שנופלים בין התלמידים ספרי מוסר וספר הנהגת המתקדשים והמתארים זכותם תגן עלינו, ומהם יראו לכל עם הארץ כאילו הם הלכה למשה מסיני. Especially there's all kinds of books of Jewish thought, of Musar, of Kabbalah, that are, he says of the blessed memory, that are going around the Jewish community. I once met a seminary girl who told me that every time she wears clothing that is too short or too, whatever her teachers told her she can't do, that Israeli soldiers die in terror attacks. Now she could even show me that in a book. I'm sure there's a book. Some idiot wrote a book somewhere. There are all kinds of books. There's a specific set of books I'm thinking about. A lot of gardening going on in that book. Those books can go straight. They don't have to. Haraperet says they don't need Geniza. My opinion is put them in the Geniza, but make sure nobody ever reads them again. There are books that were created, and what do people do? They read them. They think, wow, Halakha Moshe Misinai, Art Scroll printed a book. Feldheim wrote a book. Wow, this must be Torah given straight from Moshe Rabbeinu. And what's the problem with the people? They don't know how to discern what is actual Torah, what is not, what is gibberish. They don't know how to tell them apart. He said, when it comes to halakha, people think that doing more is the better way, and you've heard different shulim from me on this. He says, sometimes the rabbis are the ones that have to do less. ואדרבה, נהפוך הוא, שהחכם צריך להקל על עצמו יותר, כדי שיהיה שכלו בריא ושלם יותר. So sometimes a chacham can feel that by overdoing religiosity, they can burn out. And what good is a burnt out chacham? What good is a Jew who has no more energy to do Judaism? I got a gift of a Siddur today. The Rambam Siddur is 8 pages long. What, 8 pages long? For the whole year, including Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Sukkot, Shavuot. Now, let's be honest and fair. A lot of those things are abbreviations. Like he starts a sentence and you have to fill it in. So let's make the Rambam Siddur, instead of 8 pages, let's make it 40 pages, okay?
It's like
The Rambam Siddur is 40 pages.
yeah,
Yeah?
38 or something.
Now what happens? Our rabbis tell us you have to have proper kavanah when you pray. Right? You have to, for what's the most important part of morning services? Give me an example. The most important part. Shema. Shema is from the Torah. You have an obligation biblically to read the Shema. Next, what's the most important? The Amidah, communicating with the Creator in your own words. So if you just read an Amidah, don't waste your time. You have to also, in the Amidah, speak with your own words. Those are the 2 most important things. But what happens? You come to Beit Knesset, especially a Sephardic one. Let's hate Sephardim a little bit. They announce tefillah at 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock, okay, the tea and all that, I get it. Yeah. So then you come 6:05. Now all Eliyahu Navi Zechur Tov. Then Eliyahu Navi, then comes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is reading to you half of the book of the Zohar. Then you come to Korbanot. We're sacrificing this, and we're sacrificing that, and we're sacrificing the next thing. And then what happens? You start, not Pesukei Zimah. You start all the stuff before Pesukei Zimah. Extra chapters to read with your tefillin on, extra chapters to talit on. Then you start Pesukei Zimah. And you're going, and you're going. What time did you start praying? 6 o'clock? Now it's 7:45. And you say, Baruch Hashem HaMevorach. Now you start saying long blessings of Kriyat Shema. It's supposed to be 2 blessings. Now it's like 30 paragraphs. You finally get to Shema Yisrael. How much energy do you have left inside of you? Comes time for the Amidah. You're falling asleep. The only reason you stand up is you don't fall asleep in your chair. And then you wonder, wow, we have a crisis of kavanah. People have no intent when they pray. You know, I had kavanah for the first 79 pages this morning. I just can't do it anymore. Somebody wanted to bring somebody to my Beit Knesset for Yom Kippurim. I said, please don't. I said, why? Because our Siddur has over 800 pages for Yom Kippurim. It's the worst day to bring somebody to meet the synagogue. It's not the day. This is our worst day in the calendar when it comes to tefillah. I love the prayers of Yom Kippur, don't get me wrong. But listen, there are people that can't sit for a whole day. And I'm guilty of this. In my Beit Knesset, we have like an hour break, maybe. But I tell people in the middle, leave. It's too long. It's not healthy for people to do every little detail. This is the cholia fanatismo. This is a sickness, the fanaticism, which causes burnout. V'chol ma'asav, rather all of our actions, you, l'shem shamayim, l'karev et ha'rechokim b'chokhmat Elohim asher b'kibo. One must know not to observe everything, to use everything to bring those close to the Torah. And sometimes you have to know that not everything works. You can't give a whole package sometimes. You have to give different ways to get close. And therefore, he says in source 10, people need to know how to weigh things, to prioritize things. When you ask the Chacham a question, to know how to get an answer that makes sense, not a standard. If you know what the rabbi is going to answer when you call, that's not a real rabbi. That's a clerk, like the guy in court. If you know there's going to be a process, analysis that goes on, then that's a Chacham. And he says, and therefore, these abridged styles of Jewish learning lead to, again, it brings people to fanaticism. He mentioned source 11, it's not for me today, but all the things that people do once they get bit by the bug of fanaticism. He mentions all the extra songs and the extra Tehillim and all the extra Yehiratzons and all the extra Hashkavot and all everything extra, until you don't have any energy anymore to be Jewish. On page 4, once a person becomes fanaticized, they begin to reject anything that to them smells not Jewish. Somebody once told my nephew, that's a really goyish talis bag you have. Now, let's stop for a moment and analyze. I'm talking about your brother, by the way. Yeah? Okay? That's my niece Rachel. I'm talking about her brother. Yeah? Now, you have to analyze a few things, okay? I don't know in which world something not Jewish is a derogatory thing. I'm Jewish. I don't find it to be derogatory. You're not Jewish. It doesn't matter. I mean, why is that used as a derogatory word? Clearly, it's not part of my culture. But the second part of it is, which kind of non-Jews are walking around with talit bags? Like, is there a style of like H&M talit bags I didn't know about? They're non-Jewish kind. Something is rather. There's a certain. If it's not the way we do things, it's wrong. Says Rabbi Moshe Chazan that when he came to Europe, kama ma'mitkadshim, there's some very pious people. She'enam rotzim lishmoa afilu shir musari pashut or drash. They don't want to hear any non-Jewish songs, good ones that teach ethical teachings, he says. Or drash, or sermons. Bilshon medina mezukak shivatayim, in the beautiful language of the countries that we live in. ויותר בוחר לדבר בלשון המשובש שהורגלו לדבר בו דלת העם היהודים. Rather, they choose to speak in this peasant language that the Jews speak, מורכב מ100 לשונות, is made up of 100 different languages. מלדבר בלשון צחה ומנוקה מכל מין טעות ושגיאה. They'd rather speak that language, I won't mention names, than to speak one language properly, a clear language that has grammar to it, that has rhyme and reason to it. He says, why? I can't listen to non-Jewish songs. It's a good song. No, I can't listen to it. I don't want to read that book. It's not a Jewish book. I can't read it. All of a sudden, we find ourselves being fanaticized. Not only are we getting improper Jewish education, but now the education that we could get from the world around us, we're also rejecting. Source 14 says, Rabbi Moshe Chazan came to he's in Rome. In Rome, what do you have to do? You have to be in talks with the Vatican, with the Pope. He needs to quote the New Testament. There's a Sephardic Chacham, Rabbi Eliyahu ben Amozeg. His books are clearly out of print for a long time for a reason. There's a Chacham in Israel working to fix that, but the Jewish world is not ready for that avalanche to fall on its head yet. When he published his first commentary on the Torah, Em Lamikra, it was burned in Aleppo and then banned in Jerusalem. Eliyahu ben Amozeg was a pretty interesting Chacham. He was the chief rabbi of Leghorn, Livorno, Italy, at the age of 21. He was a professor in the university there. He was a Talmid Chacham of proportions we're not even familiar with. He also loved to quote from all kinds of different places. In fact, in his first commentary in Bereshit, he quotes a Midrash Matityahu. Have you heard of the Midrash Matityahu? What's Midrash Matityahu?
It's like a apocrypha that's in the
Good. But he's not actually referring to this one. The book of Matthew. He calls the New Testament a Midrash. But it's in classic Sephardic thinking, which is that Midrashim are as authoritative as... They're stories. What did the Ramban say about Midrashim? Once a priest came, Ramban with a nun. I'm not talking about from the Maimonidean side here. They came to ask him, what do you think about all of the midrashim about rabbis? He said, listen, when you go to church on Sunday, and the bishop speaks, and you like his sermon, so you listen to it, and you don't like it, you say, okay, it's wrong, and you keep moving. That's how you deal with midrashim. Let me tell you, that's not how I was taught midrashim as a kid. I remember as a child, well, Moshe Rabbeinu was 10 amot tall. That's 15 feet tall. Paro is 1 amah tall. That's 18 inches. That's. And I'm thinking, why all the conversation? Just step on the guy and leave.
That certainly solved the problem.
But that's the way that midrashim are taught. People literally, they take all these things, instead of thinking, wait, Paro, we're talking here about spiritual stature.
They had webbed fingers.
Moshe Rabbeinu is a giant in terms of spiritual stature. Paro, he thinks he's God, that guy. He's a cockroach. But at the end of the day, I don't know how tall. People don't even learn Torah properly. He says, so when you come to debate religions, what do people tell you? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about that religion. I can't listen to those books. That's a non-Jewish topic. And he says at the end of source 14, is this not again the sickness of fanaticism? It's reached up to our necks. We're drowning in fanaticism. It should be a mem. So I was typing this very late at night. Listen to Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan. I came here for this. Is that if we allow fanaticism to drown us, what are we going to lose? We will not lose Judaism. It's not true that Judaism will disappear. It's not true. Which Judaism will disappear? I underlined it for you. Ha'emunah ha'ne'imah. The pleasant faith. The pleasant Judaism can be extinguished. Judaism won't go anywhere. The fanatics, the birth rate alone will keep everyone alive. I don't mean that with a zilzul. I mean that with it's a numbers game. But what will be lost? The Torah that David HaMelech said is pleasant, is beautiful, is peaceful. She will be extinguished by the flames of fanaticism. Fanaticism leads to corruption. We mentioned about bug checking. Just today, someone sent me an article about a certain organization removed their kosher certification from somewhere. Politics. What happens to Jews when they see these things? So bad Jews, they use these things to manipulate people. I'm a bad rabbi. I can twist your arm to get money out of you. I can extort. Okay, we'll call it the Vada Rabbanim. Yeah, but really it's the mafia of the Rabbanim. If you don't do this and you don't do that and you don't turn off your music by this, I know how it works. And they still make you pay for it. I once met a guy who had a chocolate company in Mexico. I asked him, why did you stop your kosher supervision? He said, listen, I don't mind paying for the kosher supervision. So what's the problem? He said, I mind that the rabbi used to come whenever he felt like he wanted a vacation in Mexico, and he expected me to buy him only first-class tickets. That is corruption. What happens when the Jewish world is corrupt? What happens to the good Jews? Because we know what the bad Jews do. Says Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan, the good Jews, ומזה צמחה בהרת האינדיפרנציה באורות קדושים אשר אין תרופה למכתם. We've caused for certain Jews to feel religious indifference. See, worse than heresy is indifference. A heretic fighting with God. He's fighting with the Torah. But the Jew who says, listen, I don't care that I'm Jewish. Those Jews that I know, I don't ever want to be like them. I don't want my kids to be like them. I don't want to associate with them. I'm just walking out the door. That's religious indifference. And where does it come from? Don't listen to all the Kiruv seminars. It comes from assimilation. It comes from Netflix. It comes from iPhones. It comes from your fanaticism, which led to corruption, which led to Jews abandoning Judaism, and now you're trying to blame them, the victims, because of a crime that you committed. And it doesn't end there. See, there's still some good Jews that still want to be Jewish. So what do they do when they see the Jewish community become corrupt? The last piece of Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chazan in source 16. כי הדעת הנפסד הזה לעשות חדשות ולחלק הלבבות תהיה הסיבה לגרש מהסתפח בנחלת השם כמה בנים חביבים. We start to split ourselves up into denominations. I gave a lecture here. When was I here last time? upstairs called Abandoning Orthodoxy. I later made that a YouTube video, and later they tried to get me banned from the United Kingdom because of that video. Baruch Hashem, it didn't work, but how dare I say that we should abandon orthodoxy? Among us, there is no such word. We're Am Yisrael. We all come in different flavors. We all observe things in our own levels and ways. But we all belong to one people with one Torah and one way. And the job of the Chacham is to try to figure out how to incorporate all of the people under one umbrella instead of saying, my community is only for people who, and then I don't keep Shabbat, so let me go make a community of people who don't keep Shabbat, and I'll get a rabbi who doesn't keep Shabbat. And then what happened to Jewish people? He says, this will cause for the disappearance of the Jewish people. Chacham Faur summarizes what's the big deal in source 17. There are 4 steps to a lack of proper Jewish education. 1, religious fanaticism, fanatismo. That leads to, number 2, hypocrisy. Jewish people who are supposed to be observant of halakha doing really ugly things. What does that cause? Number 3, kitzoniyut datit utzviut shemetav hayudim. The good Jews say we don't want to have anything to do with religious hypocrites, and so they develop religious indifference. Religious indifference brings to source 4, ultimately heresy, abandonment of the Jewish faith and people, and that leads to what he calls schismatiko, which means schisms in the Jewish people. And once we're broken apart, and once we can't pray together, and we can't eat together, and I can't shake your etrog because I didn't check it with my magnifying glass, and I can't eat your lettuce because you didn't check it with your magnifying glass, and now we can't celebrate holidays together, and we can't pray in the same room together, and we can't study the same books together, then what happens to the Jewish people? You don't need any anti-Semites in the world. The Jewish people are purely capable of destroying themselves. And the problem is that we're smack in the middle of it. As I wish to share with you one last source for tonight. I'm going to call it a night. I know what time it is. I won't read it to you. You read it to yourself on page 5, source 18. Rabbi Shimon Agassi. Rabbi Shimon Agassi was an Iraqi Chacham. Why did I tell you he was an Iraqi Chacham? If you thought Moroccan rabbis were tough, they got nothing on the Iraqis. Where was the Talmud written? Very good. The Chachamim of the Talmud were famous for saying, if you disagree with me, I'll slit your throat like a shochet slits a chicken's throat, yeah? That's how they used to fight. Rabbi Shimon Agassi was of this flavor of Chacham. And he one-upped everybody else. He was one of the few rabbis in Baghdad who refused to take a salary from the Jewish community. He worked for his own money. And as such, he said whatever he wanted to say. And who did he say it about? Even about all the rabbis who ran in the community. And in this essay, where he essentially places the blame of everything bad happening to the Jewish people on the shoulders of the rabbis, and he mentions that you shouldn't judge the rabbis poorly. You should know that rabbis need money. And that rabbis, they do a lot of things for money. And that in the olden days, they used to have people that would pay them to say the right things and do the right things. But today, the rabbis need to feed their kids, they need to buy clothes for their wives, they need to drive nice cars. Then it was horses or whatever they were driving there. He said, so they're not able to speak freely anymore. Or they're not motivated to speak freely anymore. Then you can't say that these rabbis are wrong because they'll lose their jobs and they're right. If they don't buy into the type of Judaism that we're peddling today, they're very quickly going to find themselves in the basement of a building in Brooklyn. Surrounded by very good. That's exactly what Rabbi Shimon Agassi says. So I'm sitting in a room. This is how he ends his speech. I'm sitting in a room with a few people that are left who are willing to listen. And I'm asking you, I'll read you something on the bottom of page 5 at the right. If you know that the rabbis can't act, they're crippled. Lama nirpim atem? Why are you holding back? Do you not wish to help yourself? How long will you sit around waiting for rabbis to do their jobs? I already told the rabbis in their face, they don't do anything. What can I do for you more? He says, if you want to help yourselves, The only thing you can do, look on page 5 on the left, וכיוון שכן, let's keep going, הלא אין הדבר תלוי רק בכם. The only way to fix the problem is you. ועל דורנו זה נאמר, and about this generation says, אם אין אני לי מי לי. If I'm not for myself, then who is for me? וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, and when I'm alone, what am I? ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי, if not now, when? כי לא בכל עת תמצא אספה גדולה כזו, because not at every moment will we find a gathering of people like this. And he finishes ending the speech, you see in parentheses, he writes, דומיה ממושכה שוררת בכל הקהל הגדול. The room was silent. אין פוצה פה ומצפצף, nobody spoke. רק פוערים פיהם. Everybody's jaws were left open about what he said about the rabbis of the town. ומבטים אליי בעיניים כלות, and they're looking at me with eyes not sure what to do. And so here's where I wish to end with you tonight. In the last, this is our 8th Chagim together as a Shiviti community. In the last 7 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed me to realize that we're not alone. There are a lot of good people doing good work everywhere. You know which places we've spoken at. Many of you study in other Batei Midrash. This takes away nothing from the good work that other people are doing and that we strongly stand with and support and are here in the same mission to accomplish positive change for the Jewish community. At the end of the day, there's something special about the people who are sitting in this room. I've been given the zechut, the merit to learn with you, to talk with you, to think with you. I'm thinking of some conversations here that I've had with you in halakha, and you guys say, I can't accept that to be the case, I'm going to do something else. And there's nothing that makes me prouder than to sit in a Beit Midrash of people that don't listen to everything that I say. That are willing to argue, that are willing to think, that are willing to learn Torah. Because at the end of the day, how you execute Torah is between you and the Creator of the universe. What I've realized is that even in big cities like New York, many of us have really beautiful places to pray. Nice kiddush lunches on Shabbat, places to go hear the Torah, places to go get the shofar blown on Rosh Hashanah. We have friends that make up our smaller communities, but very few of us have a solid place where we can go and just study Torah. Torah without politics, Torah without social norms, Torah without this is what the community does, just Torah, Torah. And then we quickly realize, by the way, that when we start to study Torah, soon we lose our friends, and then we lose our communities, and then we lose our rabbis, and then we don't even have a place to go hear the shofar being blown. But that problem we'll get to when we get there. For right now, what do I see happening? Is for us to give ourselves the gift of having a place, not a physical place, a reality, in which there are other people who don't think like you. We're not a homogeneous group of people. Take a look around the table. But a group of people that want to learn Torah, that want to think, that want to grow, that want to explore, to expand horizons of Jewish thought, to think about things differently than we've thought about them before. They're not afraid of those things. And to realize that you don't need 1 million friends, and you don't need 100 Batei Knesset, but that with a small group of friends, and with a dedicated time to learn Torah, you can transform your life and give something to your children. I came here today. I didn't get paid to come here today. Nobody sponsored this trip. She did, but nobody sponsored this trip. I came here because I believe in what we can do here. I came here because I believe that if we, starting after the Chagim, for those who are interested, are willing to set time once a week to learn together. I know that New York is very big. I realized that today when I drove from JFK to Brooklyn, and it's a 13-mile drive, 20-mile drive, and it took me 1 hour and 5 minutes. It doesn't make any sense. Where I come from, 13 miles should take 13 minutes, and 20 miles should take 21 minutes. But I know that this is a very big city. So we say, I'd love to host you in Staten Island. And Zev says, that's really far. And Ariel says, why don't you come to Atlantic Beach? And that's really far. And so I can tell you that Zoom is not very far. Zoom is in your pocket with the iPhone you're not allowed to have. And we can make a time to learn together. I'm willing to make a time on the New York schedule in my week to learn Torah together. And every 2 months, every 3 months, for my wife and I to come out here and do this together. To create a Kehillat of friends, of people who learn Torah together. I'm willing to give of myself. I'm not asking for anything. Just the same dedication that I put in. And I think that what we can give ourselves is at least a chance. A chance to say to our kids, look, there's a Beit Midrash you can come sit at. There are other people. Maybe we can marry those people's kids instead of other people's kids so that they'll never come to our house again. Maybe we can have someone that when I'm struggling with something in my learning, there's somebody I can call that actually understands what I'm talking about. There are friends that don't judge me for having opinions that are different than theirs. There's a rabbi and a rabbanit who love me and care for me and want to learn with me. And so I'm throwing that ball in your court. If you're interested, if you would like, I would love for you to please get in touch with me already tonight. Don't wait. Let's make this happen. Because in a city as big as New York, and there are many good people here, I'm not taking away from that, but there still isn't a Shiviti Beit Midrash. A Beit Midrash of people who love to learn, to think, who have midot and derech eretz. I'll tell you, I have to just say, when someone asks me, so what's the difference between Shiviti and everywhere else? I said, I can't speak for everywhere else. I can tell you one thing. I've been in many open-minded Beit Midrash. And the intellectual snobbery that is there. The feeling of we know and you know nothing and you shut up and sit in the corner. I'm telling you as a rabbi who's come to this Beit Midrash, is some of the least tolerant feeling that I've ever felt in a Beit Midrash. I tell people, look, in my community, I don't have the biggest Talmidei Chachamim in the world. I don't know that I have the next Chachamim coming. I'll tell you what I have. I'm the only Kehillat in San Diego where every single person eats at every person's house. Regardless of what they do in their mitzvot, everybody eats together. I know that everybody in this Kehillat is friends with everybody else. It helps to have 30% of the Kehillat here at the table. And we can do the same thing here. A Beit Midrash that is not just about learning intellectually, that is about friendship, that is built on Ve'afta l'reacha kamocha, that is built on the values of friendship. That is something. Midot, derech eretz. Derech eretz kadma Torah. When we have that attitude together, and we're sitting together, we're here together, I think we could change the world. So with that, I'm going to ask you to do a few things. First, if you're going to leave, please come and say goodbye. There's Birkat Hamazon if you want to say